enter only the login block for command. The default login delay time of 1 second, it's automatically enforced. That last bit there, I would commit that to memory, because if you don't specify a login delay, which we'll go over in a second, that's a global config. If you don't say login delay 5 seconds and you just configure the login block for, it's automatically going to use a default of 1 second. And the range for the login delay command is between, is it 1 or 0? I think it's 1 and 10 seconds. We'll check that out more on the CLI. But this bit here, I found this isn't true. You must enter this command before issuing the login delay command, and we'll take a look at that when we're on the command line as well. I've actually been able to configure that command without putting the login block for command, but I'm digressing here. Through the new global configuration mode, login delay, which allows you to specify a login delay time to be enforced in seconds. So that's, that I was talking about. Login delay 5 seconds means that regardless of, successful or unsuccessful attempts and the number of attempts, you're just only going to be able to process one every 5 seconds. And like I said, the maximum on that is 10 seconds. I've got to believe the minimum is 1 second, especially with the verbiage they have here. Login shut down if DOS attacks are suspected. As I mentioned earlier, this is the meat and potatoes of the login block functionality. So this is your, number of failures within specified period of time. Go ahead and block all subsequent logins with, for Y amount of seconds. I make a mental bookmark for this bit here. Hosts that are permitted by a predefined access list are excluded from the quiet period. I'm not going to go over that too much here because we will hit that hard a little bit later, and that's going to be your login quiet mode access class command. Otherwise, the basic command is just login block for, and we'll look at that too, the parameters for that. This functionality is disabled by default and is not enabled if auto secure is enabled. Okay, and the last of the three functions of login block is the generation of system login messages for login detection. I'm not going to read this. I'll let you go ahead and take a look at it on your own time. There'll be a PDF that has the slides. But basically what this is just saying is that the different events that will cause a log message to be generated. So when the router switches in and out of quiet mode, and quiet mode is that mode when the router has determined that it might be under attack and it's circled the wagons and says, I'm not going to let any more login attempts occur, and I'm not going to process any more login attempts until the specified amount of time is run out. So it automatically does that. There's also two additional messages, logs that can be generated, and you generate those with optional configuration using the login on success and login on failure commands. And those are pretty cool. Those are what I was mentioning earlier, where if there's a successful login, it will log that and say, Cisco Jim logged in successfully at 10:30 on November 8th. And probably more importantly is the login on failure, which will tell you who attempted to log in, when they attempted to log in, why they failed, whether it was a bad username or a bad password. And those are cool for troubleshooting, or to it also shows the IP address of the person trying to log in, so you can find out who's quote-unquote hacking your network. The next bit is more auto-secure garbage, and that's neither here nor there. We'll definitely be going over that in another video series. The last bit here, though, currently only system logging syslog messages can be generated for login related events. Support for SNMP notification traps can be added, are to be added in a later release. So keep that in mind when you're configuring login block, as well as when you're taking the exam, that currently SNMP notifications are not supported, but they're coming down the pike. Okay, so let's take a look at an actual configuration example of a login block. We're asked to configure R1 so that 5 seconds must elapse between each login attempt. Also, ensure that if there are 3 unsuccessful login attempts within a 1-minute period, that all subsequent login attempts are blocked for a period of 30 seconds. All successful and failed login attempts should be logged to R1. So this is something that you could, this might be something that pops up every day. I don't think you're going to get a change control or a request for something that's going to be worded like this, but this is actually worded very similar to how the CCIE tasks are in the CCIE lab exam, as well as, this could be something that you see on your CCNA security or CCSP test for one of the simulations, where it gives you, these tasks that you have to complete. So let's take a look at this. Let's look at the first sentence. Configure R1 so that 5 seconds must elapse between each login attempt. That's going to be our login delay. And we can see here that we set a login delay of 5 seconds. Now remember back to the documentation, it said that if you're configuring the login delay, you have to have the login block 4 configured first. I told you that doesn't seem to be the case in real life, at least with the code that I was running. But for the sake of argument, if it says so in the Cisco documentation, then that's your Bible. That's word. Don't get on a don't be taking an exam and then answer something based on real life experience versus something that's in the documentation, because I can almost guarantee the documentation is going to win. You can give feedback during the exam, so if you get a question like this, you could say, hey, I answered it this way, but I've noticed that in real life I can actually configure this, blah, 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 if you want to go that far. I guess, long story short, that the documentation is what you should be using as your source, your authority. Also ensure that, my point, I guess, here was that you're going to actually want to do sentence 2 first in this case. Also ensure that if there are 3 unsuccessful login attempts within a 1-minute period, that all subsequent login attempts are blocked for a period of 30 seconds. So that's your login block 4. And it's saying here, it's a little goofy, it says login block 4. This is the number of seconds that you want to block once you've determined that there have been, there might be an attack. And you're defining that attack as the number of attempts, which is 3, within the number of seconds, which is 60. And this is something that Cisco loves to do, is to give you a period of time or some other parameter and make you convert it, because they're trying to make sure that you know what's going on CLI. And in the CLI, you're just going to use a question mark and you're going to find out that it's 60 seconds. So you wouldn't say within 1, because this is actually looking for this parameter in seconds rather than minutes. And then finally, all successful and failed login attempts should be logged to R1. That's our login on failure and login on success, and we're specifying log here. You have 2 choices here. You have log and you have trap. And I think that we saw earlier in the documentation that the traps are actually a feature that's not quite ready for prime time, that's going to be coming somewhere down the pike. So just keep that in mind for configuration. I did want to go back to this real quick, this login delay. If we recall earlier that if you do login block for 30 seconds, blah, 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 our parameters here, if you don't set this delay, iOS is going to set it for you, and it's automatically going to be 1 second by default. So keep that in your mind all the time, because you could see that on a test, or if you're assuming that the delay is some other, it doesn't have a delay at all. It actually does. So when you configure this command, you actually are setting this command to a default of 1 second, which you will not see in the running config. Okay, so these next couple of slides are going to show us the verification commands for login block. And the first one is a show login block, and we're going to see the output while we're in normal mode. And remember, normal mode means that we're allowing login attempts. So you issue this show login command, and this gives you a lot of information here. And actually, you can probably reverse engineer the login block configuration just from the output of this command. And I would not be surprised that if Cisco gave you a question like that, give you the show login configuration, the output, and ask you, is this configured, or what's configured, what are the parameters that are configured. And you could see all of this here within this output. It's actually a pretty cool command.